please subscribe and share for more story. Eleanor Whitby had not planned to speak calmly that morning, yet when she looked at her daughter-in-law, her voice surprised even herself. It was steady, almost gentle. She told Veronica that she should enjoy using the new dishes she had bought, because she would soon be using them in her own house, not this one. Eleanor was 71, a retired librarian who valued order, quiet, and memory. To anyone listening, she would sound cruel, the classic monster mother-in-law throwing out a young family. But this decision was not sudden. It was the result of 10 months of swallowed words, ignored boundaries, and love mistaken for permission. For 9 years after her husband Harold died, Eleanor lived alone in peaceful companionship with her home. The silence was not empty. It was full of ticking clocks, turning pages, and soft routines. Her colonial house outside Boston held her memories gently. Harold's armchair still faced the window. His roses bloomed faithfully each spring. Eleanor's days followed a rhythm. Gardening in the morning, reading in the afternoon, classical music at night. She was content. The house did not feel lonely. It felt complete. Everything changed the evening her son Matthew called. His voice sounded hollow, strained. He had lost his job when his tech company downsized. Worse, his wife Veronica was 6 months pregnant. Eleanor felt her chest tighten with worry. When Matthew asked if they could stay just for a few months, she did not hesitate. "Come home," she said. "This is your home." Relief flooded his voice. Veronica's excitement rang loudly in the background. Eleanor prepared eagerly. She aired out the guest room, hung fresh curtains, and laid out soft blankets. She cleared space in Matthew's old room, imagining it as a nursery. At an antique shop, she bought a small rocking horse for her future granddaughter. When Matthew and Veronica arrived with suitcases and promises, Matthew swore it would only be temporary. Veronica hugged Eleanor and promised not to be a burden. Eleanor believed her. The first weeks were almost pleasant. Eleanor cooked for 3 again. Matthew left early to search for work. Veronica rested, scrolling on her phone. The first warning came quietly. Eleanor returned from the market to find her floral curtains gone, replaced with heavy gray ones. Veronica smiled brightly and said the old ones looked dated. Eleanor swallowed her discomfort. Curtains were small. Veronica was pregnant. Soon the sofa was moved for better lighting. Eleanor's classical mornings were replaced by loud music. When she politely asked for headphones, Veronica sighed and said modern rhythms were better for the baby. Eleanor retreated upstairs, telling herself it was temporary. She did not realize the storm had already entered her home. By the 4th month, asking stopped completely. Eleanor came home to find her furniture stacked in the hallway. Veronica announced plans for a play area and sent Eleanor's handmade bookshelf to the damp basement. Eleanor stood frozen as her memories were dismantled piece by piece. That night, Eleanor cried quietly into her pillow. She said nothing. Matthew was always working. Veronica was pregnant. Eleanor told herself endurance was love, not realizing she was slowly disappearing inside her own home. In the 5th month, the atmosphere in Eleanor Whitby's home shifted again when Veronica's mother, Lorna, arrived without warning. She showed up one afternoon dragging a loud leopard print suitcase and announcing she would help with the final stretch of the pregnancy. What Eleanor assumed would be a short visit stretched into weeks. Lorna was louder than her daughter and far more entitled. She criticized Eleanor's cooking, called it bland hospital food, and treated the house as if it were already Veronica's. The worst part came at night, when Eleanor heard their whispers from the kitchen. "Why are you still in that tiny guest room?" Lorna asked Veronica. "You need the master bedroom. It's better for the baby." Veronica replied that Eleanor had refused, calling it her marital room. Lorna scoffed. "She's alone. What does one old woman need with all that space?" Eleanor stood at the sink, hands submerged in greasy water, listening to her own erasure spoken aloud. She told herself not to react, not to escalate. But something poisonous had entered her home, and it did not leave when Lorna finally did. In the 6th month, Matthew finally found work. It was not the career leap he had hoped for, Just a junior position at a small startup with less pay, but to Eleanor it felt like a lifeline. Hope flickered quietly inside her. One evening at dinner, she brought it up gently. "Now that you're working again," she said carefully, "have you thought about looking for a place of your own?" The air at the table thickened instantly. Matthew stared down at his plate, pushing peas around with his fork. Veronica placed a protective hand on her swollen belly and sighed. "We still can't afford a deposit," she said flatly. "And, with the baby coming any day, we need to save." She looked directly at Eleanor. "You understand, right?" Eleanor did understand, but not in the way Veronica meant. She understood that temporary had quietly become permanent. That sacrifice had turned into expectation. Still, her mouth betrayed her. "Of course," she said softly. "Stay as long as you need." That night, Eleanor lay awake staring at the ceiling, knowing she had crossed a line she might never be able to redraw. Baby Clara was born on a bitter November morning. Eleanor spent hours in the hospital waiting room, surrounded by antiseptic smells and humming machines. When she was finally allowed in, everything else faded. Clara was tiny, perfect, wrapped in a pink blanket. When Eleanor held her granddaughter for the first time, warmth spread through her chest, dissolving months of quiet pain. "She's beautiful," Eleanor whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. For a brief, powerful moment, all the gray curtains, lost furniture, and swallowed insults felt worth it. Veronica watched from the hospital bed, smiling, but it was not a shared smile. It was sharp, possessive. Eleanor did not understand then that Clara had become leverage. From that moment on, every demand would be justified in the baby's name. When they brought Clara home, Eleanor prepared everything carefully, believing love would soften what had hardened. Instead, love became the tool that bound her tighter. 2 days after returning home, Veronica found Eleanor alone in the kitchen, holding Clara like a shield. "We need to talk," she said firmly. The guest room, she explained, was too small for the three of them. The baby cried too much. There wasn't enough space. "You should give us the master bedroom," Veronica said plainly. Eleanor felt the floor tilt beneath her. She tried to explain what that room meant. The years, the memories, the night Harold had died peacefully beside her. Veronica cut her off. "You need to think about your granddaughter," she said sharply. "Are you really going to deny a newborn a proper space just because you're sentimental? How do you argue with that?" 5 days later, Eleanor returned from the grocery store to find her belongings piled into the guest room. Her wedding photo sat face down on the dresser. Her bed had been transformed into a baby station. No one had asked. No one had waited. After that, respect vanished completely. Eleanor was no longer Margaret or even Eleanor. She became Ma, the live-in helper. Veronica issued instructions daily. No garlic, it upset the baby. No perfume, it was toxic. The thermostat stayed at 78 day and night. The electricity bill tripled. Every demand was framed as concern for Clara, and Eleanor complied because every time she looked at her granddaughter's small face, she melted. Veronica knew this and used it without hesitation. In the 9th month, Eleanor lost her final refuge, her sewing room. "Clara needs a dedicated playroom for early stimulation," Veronica announced. Eleanor packed her fabrics and patterns into boxes and carried them down to the damp basement, where mildew already crept along the walls. That night, Eleanor looked at her reflection in the guest room mirror and barely recognized herself. A stranger stood there, tired, diminished, displaced in her own home. Matthew had become a ghost. He left before dawn and returned after Eleanor was asleep, exhausted and distant. When Eleanor gently tried to mention Veronica's behavior, he sighed heavily. "She's just stressed," he said. "She wants what's best for Clara. You want that too, right?" Eleanor nodded, silenced again by love. But silence came at a cost. She felt herself shrinking, learning how little space she was allowed to occupy. She stopped inviting friends over. She stopped playing music. She moved quietly, as if afraid of disturbing a house that no longer felt like hers. 10 months had passed since that first phone call, and Eleanor felt older than her 71 years. She did not yet know the breaking point would come in the kitchen, with something as fragile and irreplaceable as porcelain. On a gray Tuesday morning, Eleanor came downstairs early, hoping for a moment of peace. Instead, she found the kitchen trash bin overflowing in the middle of the floor. A flash of pale pink caught her eye. Her heart stopped. Inside the garbage lay her mother's rose-patterned china, buried under coffee grounds and napkins. The dishes had been used for every holiday, every birthday, every family gathering for 45 years. Eleanor lifted a cracked saucer with trembling hands. Veronica's voice cut through the silence. "Oh, that," she said casually. "They were old. I bought a modern set." Eleanor felt something inside her finally snap, not anger, but clarity. Calmly, she looked at her daughter-in-law and said, "Enjoy your new dishes in your new house. You will not be staying in mine any longer." Veronica froze, a glass of water suspended halfway to her mouth. Eleanor felt the fog of submission lift for the first time in months. That night, she sat on the bed in the small guest room with the salvaged china at her feet, washing each piece carefully. She did not cry. She thought. Eleanor had spent 40 years as a librarian. She trusted facts more than emotion. At 3 in the morning, she went to the untouched study and opened her records. Bills, receipts, bank statements. The numbers were staggering. Electricity had tripled. Groceries had doubled. Then she saw it, a charge for the new dishes on her own credit card. Veronica had not just disrespected her. She had stolen from her. Eleanor closed the ledger slowly. This was no longer about hurt feelings. It was about survival. Eleanor did not sleep that night. She sat at the small desk in the untouched study, the lamp casting a soft circle of light over scattered papers. Bank statements lay open beside grocery receipts and utility bills. One figure after another told the same story. She had been drained quietly, steadily. Electricity that once averaged $90 a month had climbed past $300. Water bills had tripled because of Veronica's long, therapeutic baths. Grocery costs had ballooned with organic-only demands and specialty baby items Eleanor never bought for herself. Then came the discovery that hardened her resolve. Scrolling through her credit card history, Eleanor found charges she did not recognize: clothing stores, beauty retailers, subscription boxes. Her hands trembled as she added them up. More than $2,000, all unauthorized. Veronica had taken the card from Eleanor's old desk without permission. This was not misunderstanding. It was theft. Eleanor leaned back in the chair, a strange calm settling over her. For 10 months, she had wondered if she was overreacting, too sensitive, too old. The numbers answered her clearly. She was not imagining anything. She had been used. And now that she saw it, she knew she could not unsee it. Still, Eleanor needed one final truth, one that money alone could not provide. 2 days later, she tested the reality she feared. Veronica was in the living room scrolling on her phone while Clara napped. Eleanor entered slowly, one hand pressed to her chest, her breathing shallow. "Veronica," she said weakly, "I don't feel well. My chest hurts." Veronica glanced up briefly, annoyance flickering across her face. "It's probably indigestion," she said. "You used garlic last night." Eleanor sat down heavily. "It feels different," she whispered. "My father died of a heart attack. I think I need a doctor." Veronica sighed loudly and checked her phone. "I can't," she said. "I have prepaid yoga and brunch. It's non-refundable." Eleanor asked if she could at least call Matthew. Veronica waved her off. "He's busy. Call an Uber if you're worried." Then she picked up her yoga mat, told Eleanor to keep an eye on the baby, and walked out. The door closed softly behind her. Eleanor sat alone, the test complete. To Veronica, her life was worth less than a class. Eleanor did not call an Uber. She called her neighbor, Mrs. Klein, who arrived within minutes. Together they went to Eleanor's doctor, who listened carefully before shaking his head. "This isn't a heart attack," he said, "but it's dangerous. Your blood pressure is extremely high. Chronic stress like this will kill you." He looked at Eleanor steadily. Whatever is happening in your life must stop. Eleanor nodded. That evening, she called her niece Hannah, a family law attorney known for her sharp mind and quiet efficiency. I need advice, Eleanor said. And I need a discreet. Hannah arrived the next morning while Veronica was out. Eleanor laid everything out, the bills, the statements, the theft. Hannah's expression hardened. This is criminal fraud, she said. Eleanor shook her head. I don't want jail. I want my house back. Hannah nodded. Then we do this cleanly. Hannah worked quickly, drafting a formal eviction notice. 30 days to vacate. Itemized charges totaling over $20,000. Documentation attached. Be prepared, Hannah warned. They will try to make you the villain. Eleanor thought of the china in the trash, of being left alone during her test. I'm ready, she said. That evening, Eleanor overheard Veronica in the garden telling Matthew, relax. Your mom won't do anything. She needs us. Eleanor walked into the living room with the envelope. Sit down, she said. Her voice startled them. Veronica laughed when she opened the papers, until she read further. This is insane, she shouted. Matthew looked pale. Eleanor calmly laid out the theft. You leave in 15 days, she said, or I involve the police. The room fell silent. Matthew looked at his wife and finally saw her clearly. We'll go, he said quietly. The next 15 days passed in tense silence. Boxes appeared. Arguments whispered behind closed doors. Veronica did not speak to Eleanor again. Matthew avoided her eyes. Eleanor spent her time in the garden, pruning roses Harold had planted decades earlier. With every branch trimmed, she felt lighter. On the 15th day, a small moving truck arrived. Matthew approached Eleanor at the door with a check and a handwritten apology from Veronica. I'm so sorry, Mom, he said, his voice breaking. Eleanor nodded. I love you, she said, but love does not mean surrender. She did not hug him. The wound was still fresh. She watched the truck disappear down the street and closed the door behind it. The house was silent again, but different. Wounded, but hers. Eleanor changed the locks that afternoon. She hired painters and chose a warm yellow for the living room. Furniture and books came up from the basement. She reclaimed the master bedroom slowly, washing walls and airing memories. She also did something new. She began therapy. In her therapist's quiet office, Eleanor spoke honestly about guilt and anger. You did not fail, the therapist said gently. You learned boundaries. Eleanor felt something loosen inside her. 6 months passed. Eleanor adopted a gray tabby cat named Oliver. Life settled. Matthew repaid the stolen money faithfully. One Sunday, he returned alone with pastries and humility. He asked if he could sit on the porch for coffee. Eleanor agreed. Their relationship restarted carefully, built on honesty instead of obligation. 2 years later, Eleanor's home was alive again, but not crowded. She saw her granddaughter often, as a grandmother, not a caretaker. Veronica was civil, quieter now. Changed. One evening, Eleanor set the table with her repaired china. Gold filled every crack. She smiled, understanding at last. Boundaries were not cruelty. They were the art of repair, and she was whole again. Thanks for watching. If you value stories of respect, dignity, and justice, please subscribe. It means more than you know, and it lets me keep sharing the lessons life has carved into me.